Hi and welcome back to another video on this channel. Thanks for joining me today. Today's gonna be my May wrap up, and it's gonna be a really quick video because honestly I did not read a lot this month. I just couldn't focus. I realized that a lot of people are able to finish a lot of books in 1 month because they read a lot of fiction in between. And maybe I'm just making excuses for myself. I completed 4 books, but a lot of them are pretty short. So let me just get the books for you. This month, I read a total of 4 books. Okay, 3 of them are nonfic and 1 of them is fiction, is a novel. Yay me for reading a novel. But I would say that even though these books are kind of short and dense, it did take me a while, like about a week-ish, to kind of read the book and digest it and sort of think about it. And also I was preparing a lot for a lot of other videos that I was doing last month, for example the capitalism and work video, as well as the mental health video and my favorite books. So those videos did take up some time in terms of preparation and research. So I think definitely that probably contributed to why I didn't read as much as previous months. But let's just get into the books ASAP. So the very first book that I read is this book. And look at that cover anyway. It's Neoliberal Morality in Singapore, How Family Policies Make State and Society by Youyenn. Now, I don't know whether you know Youyenn, but she's pretty well known in the local scene as a sociologist who has done a really amazing book on inequality in Singapore, and it's called This Is What Inequality Looks Like. I strongly encourage you to read the book. I do think that it's probably like the seminal book about inequality in Singapore. Reading this is because I am personally very invested in understanding how public housing plays into what makes a Singaporean identity. If you didn't already know, Singapore does have pretty high rates of ownership. A lot of Singaporeans do stay in public housing that's provided by the state. I mean, it's not provided by the state, it's like heavily subsidized by the state. But the caveat is that it's only really accessible through marriage, which is what the government kind of assumes. Like, they kind of assume that the general population will get married in a heterosexual relationship. It's very engineered, and a lot of people have criticized this approach as being a bit too interventionist, like too much intervention. But at the same time, it has provided a lot of the citizens with affordable housing. So it's like a pros and cons, and in this book it really kind of goes into how family policies is one prong that the government uses in order to, say, justify certain neoliberal mindsets. What was my biggest takeaway from this book was that Youyenn makes an argument that the family unit is used as a kind of cover for political and civic engagement. So that means that your stake in the country is manifested through your family unit, which is, I mean, it's common sense, but I never had it articulated this way. Growing up in Singapore, that's kind of what you take for granted, but to have an academic sort of break it down and kind of interview people about their experiences with housing in Singapore, it really kind of started to make a lot more sense, and how a lot of people actually do fall through the cracks. For example, single parents have a lot of trouble getting suitable housing if they have children that they have to care for, and if they have work and employment. And it, if you're not in a heterosexual marriage, it's also quite difficult to navigate housing in some senses. So I would strongly recommend this if you're already sort of familiar with the Singaporean context, because it is quite academic. But I do have my caveats about this book. I do think that it's slightly outdated, and the pool of interviewers that Youyenn reached out to is very, very much following the dominant narrative. And I would really love to see a follow-up to this paper or this book in a few years' time, or if housing policies are going to change. Actually, housing is one of the stronger points that the opposition parties in Singapore use in order to gain more popularity. So that's kind of interesting. Would really love to see how it pans out in the next few years, but I'm not gonna get any public housing anytime soon. Yeah, I'm just gonna wait until I'm 35. And if you are wondering why 35, I'll link down the Housing Development Board's website so you can go and research about Singapore yourself. Now, the next book that I finished was this book, How to Be an Anti-Capitalist in the 21st Century by Erik, Olin, Wright. It's pretty much self-explained in this title. It is very theory-based, so it doesn't really have a lot of examples, like real-life examples as to how communities and collectives can become anti-capitalist or how they practice anti-capitalism. But it is very useful in terms of an overview, of what generally are the schools of thought within anti-capitalist thinking. I would say it's really very short. I mean, you can very easily finish this, but yes, it does have a lot of very political sciencey terms, which I'm very new to because I'm not trained in political science. So I spent most of my time really like reading one page slowly at a time. This is really, really, really broad, and it's spoken like a true armchair philosopher in some senses. Do take that into account if you do want to pick up this book and read it. I am currently putting together a resource of other works around capitalism or anti-capitalism, and I'll probably share the resources in the community post in about a week's time. That's going to take me a while to compile, and a lot of people shared their own book recommendations in the comment section of that video that I did on capitalism. So I'm going to compile that, and I think that would be a much more useful resource than just this book alone. I do think you have to supplement this book with many other books that provide a lot more nuanced and much more contextual applications. Now, moving on to the third book. This is Hope in the Dark, Untold Histories and Wild Possibilities by Rebecca Solnit. Now, this is another short book again, and I'm reading a lot of short books, but let's just repeat that it's dense, okay? This book, it's actually published pretty long time ago. I think it was in early 2000s, which I was really surprised by because the writing still seems so relevant even until today. And this is my first time reading anything by Rebecca Solnit, and I can understand why she's such a loved writer. I have not read her other books, and I think I will. I'm pretty interested in what she has to say about other topics that she's interacted with. I would say that this book is a collection of essays that are pretty optimistic and hopeful, and what Solnit posits is that there's enough activists and writers and general people talking about really despairing things, and she believes that her work is focused on optimism precisely because there's enough doom out there, and that's why she's taking such an intentionally optimistic point of view. I picked this book up because I was struggling a lot with finding hope in things, but it is a very light read. So I feel like I need more substantial theories of hope than this. Do pick this up if you just want a little bit of motivation, just a little bit. Her writing is really beautiful though. I can see why. It can be really uplifting to read her writing. So it is very feel good. I felt good after reading this book. But it isn't theoretically rigorous. It's beautiful writing. It's sort of fleeting. And that's how I guess you should enjoy this book. Okay, the last book I read was The Minorities by Suffian Hakim, which is a local author here in Singapore. And oh my god, I had this book since last year. I don't know if you've watched my Singlit book haul. Really briefly, this is a novel that is about supernatural happenings in Singapore. This is a novel about family, I think. But it has so much more than that. It has like an incredibly diverse cast. It has really humorous yet very tender writing, like very insightful writing. And it also has like this amazing blend of supernatural and realistic references to local culture, which I really, really love. I mean, it has a lot of hidden gems in it, which I think you can only really pick up if you're familiar with Singaporean culture, or if you're familiar with these sort of political nuances in Singapore. And there's this whole kind of questioning of who really belongs, like what is a home? what is Singapore, and you know, who gets to call each other family. I really enjoyed it. I think this is such an entertaining book. And Suffian Hakim is, you know, a pretty well-loved author in Singapore. I think his other book that was about like a retelling of Harry Potter in Singapore sold really well in the local market, which is pretty rare for like local works. You know, Singapore doesn't really have a very thriving literature scene, so it was really nice to see that his writing hit the right spot of like critical but also really enjoyable and really entertaining. And I'm really happy that I picked this book up because, you know, it really touches a lot of things that I myself grapple a lot with, like being a migrant, for example, in Singapore, you know, having family that doesn't fit conventional norms, the desire to belong, the desire to make it big, the desire to find closure. There's even questions about intergenerational trauma and about diversity. I think a really big topic here is diversity. I would really recommend this so much, especially if you're in Singapore and you want to find a book to read, a novel to read that's enjoyable. And I would say that maybe if you're not so familiar with Singaporean culture, that some details might feel a bit like new to you or unfamiliar. The pacing of the book was a bit shocking for me at some times, but I don't know whether it's because I'm not used to reading fiction or novels, so I really don't have like a basis of comparison. Like I can't say that like, oh, this is a great novel in terms of writing style or in terms of pacing or in terms of characterization. All I can say is that I really enjoyed it and I really loved the themes that were covered in this story. All-rounded applause for this book over here. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this video. It's really short because, yeah, 4 books, and I was being quite distracted towards the end of this month because a lot of things were kind of blowing up on social media, and I was kind of grappling with a lot of shifts in dynamic. I cope very slowly, and I don't think that's a wrong or a bad thing. Yeah, and today I just came back from a long shift at the cafe, so I mean, it's not really a cafe yet, doing coffee, so yeah, I'm rambling a little bit. Thanks so much for joining me in this video. I am actually reading like 3 books concurrently now, and we'll see whether I finish them in the next month. Thanks so much again, and I hope you enjoyed the video. The books I read this month were pretty different, and I hope that at least one of them kind of piqued your interest. I mean, not gonna lie, I really enjoyed this month. I think 1 week per book was a really great pace for me. The last time I did that was, I think, in March, where I read 1 book a week as well. And I would say this is a super reasonable pace, so don't worry if you feel like you're a slow reader, because really take your time and enjoy the books, enjoy whatever you're learning. I think that's what matters the most. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video, which would be the Q&A. So if you haven't asked any questions yet, go to my community post and leave your questions there, and I'll try my best to answer them. I hope you're having a good week. Please do stay safe with your loved ones as well, and I wish you all the very best this week, next month, all the days ahead. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.